Yeah.
Hello there. You know I couldn't start this review any other way. Come on, guys. But yeah, finally, we are here. We are talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi, the new limited series in the Star Wars franchise, starring Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader - Anakin Skywalker, and so many more, directed by Deborah Chow solely. So, this series has gotten a lot of backlash from Star Wars fans, and I also went on and talked about the series on Talkin' TV podcast, so check that episode up and you'll see what I kind of have to say about it. But I didn't really get fully in depth. I didn't get to say what I wanted to say to quite the extent I wanted to. Well, here I am. Obviously this is going to be a spoiler review of the whole series, so if you have not watched Obi-Wan Kenobi, please go check it out. It's on Disney+. I do recommend you do it, especially if you are as big of a Star Wars fan as I am. So with that out of the way, let's continue. Now, this was such a hotly anticipated series because a lot of Star Wars fans wanted to see what was happening to Obi-Wan on Tatooine in the time in between Revenge of the Sith and the first Star Wars film. And obviously, if you look back at the prequels, not very well received, but one of the things that everybody seemed to love from that trilogy of films was Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So naturally, having him come back, and also just the prospect of having Hayden Christensen actually step into the suit of Darth Vader, was really enticing for a lot of Star Wars fans, including myself, because it really did feel like, oh, we were giving these actors a second chance to show what they can do, especially Ewan McGregor, who's just so beloved on so many fronts. And yeah, this was really my most anticipated Star Wars show for a while after Mandalorian Season 2 ended. Certainly much more than Book of Boba Fett. But the thing that really got me excited was I wanted to see, are they going to delve into Obi-Wan's psyche, like the guilt he's feeling after he killed Anakin, like what was going through his head at this time? And obviously I wanted it to be very, very character driven, as it should have been. Now, I think a sense of expectation also plays a part into what you want out of this show, because obviously Disney's going to do their own thing. They have been for a while, and they've been, quite frankly, doing terrible with it sometimes. And a lot of people felt that about this show. And first off, right out of the way, I'm going to say I don't get it. I don't think that this is poorly made at all. Yeah, sure, there are flaws in the script and in the writing, and we'll obviously get into that. But I don't see why everyone thinks this is so terrible. I think that this is really, really good. And obviously there's some stuff in it that could have been better and wasn't quite what I wanted. But at the same time, it still made me appreciate Ewan McGregor as this character, and made me appreciate the prequels and also even the original trilogy a bit more. And I think that's really impressive, and what I think the show ultimately set out to do. And now, starting with episode 1, when I watched this episode, I was like, this is everything I wanted from the series. The way they set Obi-Wan up, he's working at this meat packing place on Tatooine, hiding in the shadows, and it's just seeing his kind of day-to-day routine was something I was very much looking forward to. And then you have the whole I thought it was a little weird, the flashback at the beginning starts with the younglings, but it makes sense to where the story ends, with the Grand Inquisitor and Riva searching for these Jedi who are in hiding, and it would make sense that there were some younglings who got away during Order 66, and one of them is played by Benny Safdie, who I think is really a nice inclusion in the show. And obviously he's kind of like the guy who goes to Obi-Wan and says, hey, like, I know who you are, and you should be helping, you should be hiding away. And he's like just saying, throw your lightsaber in the sand, bury it, get as far away as you possibly can. Tell him, the Empire's going to come down on you and kill you. And I really like that contrast, because Obi-Wan is a very, very different place than he was at the end of Revenge of the Sith, which would make sense and is in line with the story. Now, it really is interesting to see Obi-Wan in this place, considering where he is in A New Hope, and obviously that's the whole point of this series. But you really do feel his sense of disillusionment with the whole Jedi way of living and just everything that has gone down, being hunted and all that. So it perfectly makes sense that Obi-Wan is in the position that he's in. And to that point, I have to talk about the introduction of Moses Ingram as Revo, who I think might be the most controversial character in the entire series. And we'll get into her, but I think in this episode she appears pretty one note, right? She's just kind of spouting off kind of like not so great dialogue. And, she just is the intimidating presence that Obi-Wan has to put up with. Well, at least not yet. But she's definitely set up in this episode as the big bad besides Vader in this series. And I also just love Joel Edgerton in the role of Owen Lars. Joel Edgerton is such a great actor, and it was so great to see him come back as well, because he didn't really do anything in the prequels, and obviously his career took off after that, not because of those films. And so to see like just the interactions between him and Obi-Wan, when Obi-Wan like brings a toy to the Lars homestead for Luke, and he just kind of throws it in his face and is like, you need to stay away from him. And he's like saying, when he comes of age, the boy must be trained. And he says, like you trained his father? And it's like, ooh. Like that is a piece of such biting, scathing dialogue that I absolutely love. And really you see the paternal instinct that Owen has for this kid, being Luke. And I think it even strengthens the beginning of New Hope, when he doesn't seem like this kind of grouchy old man who is kind of, holding back Luke from what he really is supposed to be. You see like how protective he is of him, and he really loves him as a son, especially, after Riva confronts him and he kind of like says, no, I'm not protecting any Jedi, and Obi-Wan thanks him. He says, I wasn't doing it for you. A really, really brilliant piece of dialogue, and a really brilliant scene, especially when the Inquisitors are intimidating the people of Tatooine, and like Riva cuts the one woman's hands off. She was kind of dumb. Why would you put her hands out? But anyway, really, really great stuff set up in this first episode. And then we get the introduction of Leia, of all characters. Now, I wasn't expecting this, but I should have, because I knew Jimmy Smits was in the cast, so it made sense that they had to bring Leia in. Well, they didn't have to, but regardless, if you're going to bring in a legacy character, it's good that it wasn't Luke, we're kind of divvying up the time here. And I think that Vivian Lyra Blair is really fantastic as Leia, this young 10-year-old version of Leia. Though, let's be honest, she speaks like a 45-year-old and is very, very precocious. But even with that being said, I think it is in line with who Leia is as a character in the original trilogy. And she really does deliver the dialogue very well, considering what it is. And just the way they set her up too, she really doesn't want to be a part of this whole royal hierarchy of Alderaan. And she's just kind of misbehaving, kind of getting into like her own little side quest with her little droid Lola. And I just love the way she talks smack to her cousin. That was like one of the best scenes in the first episode. But the scene that was even better is really when Jimmy Smits steps back into the role of Bail Organa. Yet again, another really great part of the prequels, and how they expand his character and the relationship he has with his daughter. Like when she's like saying, oh, I'm not even a real Organa. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, you're more of an Organa than anybody could possibly be. And it's just really a beautiful, touching scene between father and daughter in the series. And then, of course, she gets chased down and captured by Flea, of all people. And this scene, in hindsight, I was like, okay, this is really stupid. Like, they can't catch up to this little girl. Like, come on. It was just really, really badly executed. But besides that moment in the first episode, I really, really loved it. And then Bail Organa, obviously, going to Obi-Wan and sending him a message, be like, hey, please help me out. I know you're such a great friend, and I know you're reliable. Please help me save my daughter. He really can't say anything but yes. And then that sets us off into the second episode, which turns into the escort rescue mission, which we're all so fond of, right? So the thing is, I thought that this would have been a good catalyst, like a good jumping off point to kind of get Obi-Wan back into the swing of things, you know, him kind of like learning how to be a Jedi again. What is the importance of being a part of the rebellion and fighting against the Empire as opposed to kind of cowering away in the shadows? It really did seem like a good idea. But obviously as the series goes along, I think they linger way too long on this mission. But I did love the second episode as well. And also in this episode, I just absolutely love how they flesh out the world. So much great world building that I think goes underappreciated in the series. Especially that moment where you see the clone trooper on the street, played by Tamira Morrison, obviously. And he's like asking for change, and he has like this scraggly beard and his helmet, and Obi-Wan throws some change in his helmet, and it's really draws such a great parallel to, like, let's say the Vietnam veterans coming back to America and kind of being tossed aside, because obviously the Empire didn't need the clone troopers anymore, and it's a great piece of social and political commentary in this show. With, you know, all the space adventure stuff, but it really does feel like an expansion of the Star Wars world, even though we're kind of revisiting the same old characters that we know and love. And also there's the introduction of Haja, played by Kumail Nanjiani, who I feel like he was kind of shoehorned into the show. It really was kind of like, oh, we were able to get Kumail Nanjiani, so let's put him in here. And it didn't feel like he served that big of a purpose as a story, except a star-studded cameo, even though he does show up in later episodes, which makes even less sense. But it's kind of a cool idea where he's kind of like this guy who acts like a fake Jedi, and he's like trying to give transport to people, and like it's kind of like his way of making business, and he's it's all visual tricks. Really cool idea. And then of course Obi-Wan comes to him and is like trying to find Leia, because obviously Revo was the one who sent out these bounty hunters to get her and capture her, because she's really fixated on Obi-Wan. And that was another part of the series which I don't know if everybody's still 100% clear on. But yeah, he finds Leia, he knocks out, you know, the bounty hunters. And this is where Leia kind of gets annoying, because she's not trusting him. She's being very, very precocious and annoying. And then she runs off from him because she doesn't actually believe he's a Jedi. Oh, but regardless, I just love the action that ensues, especially, you know, all these bounty hunters going after Obi-Wan. You know, his face is popping up all over the place, and they're just going after him. And of course, Leia kind of shoots herself in the foot almost, because not believing him, she jumps off a building, and then he saves her with the Force. And, you know, okay, whatever. But she trusts him. It's a beautiful character moment, though, when she finally realizes who he is and the importance of Obi-Wan as a character. And then, of course, Riva's looking for Obi-Wan. Obviously, that's why she put out the thing to go find him. And Haja kind of has a little bit of a redemption arc, telling him, hey, go to this hangar, you know, you can get off of here, go off-world. And then Riva interrogates Haja and somehow doesn't kill him, because apparently we need Kumail to come up in another episode. And basically confronts Obi-Wan. There's this great scene where he's hiding from her, and she knows he's there, and she's like saying, Anakin is alive. And Obi-Wan didn't know this. He thought he died on Mustafar, not realizing that Anakin had become Darth Vader. And I think that adds so much interesting conflict in the story, but on some level I feel like it isn't handled very well, because I feel like we should have seen his guilt beforehand about having to kill Anakin, and it really doesn't feel like that was built up well enough. Though the reveal is great that he didn't know, it really is such a great but misguided moment in the series when it comes to the writing, because you're starting to see the inconsistencies a little bit in that sense. And then of course he gets off with Leia, knowing this information now, that this girl's father is still out there and could potentially get a hold of her and kill her, or convert her to his cause, either one. But even so, it really is a great ending to a second episode, and really keeps you hooked into the third. And then we get to this third episode, and woo, there is so much going on, because obviously Obi-Wan and Leia make it to Mapuzo, the place that Haja told him to go. And then they run into this hick Empire supporter who's played by Zach Braff of all people, but sounds like Seth Rogen. It's really bizarre, but I do love like the puppetry on him. And this, I think this episode is insanely well directed. Just the tension that's built up throughout the entire thing when the stormtroopers get on the back of this truck and Obi-Wan is with Leia, knowing that they could kill them any second or bring them in. And of course when they're like making up this story and Obi-Wan lets it slip and says Leia, and how they have to cover it up, and just saying like, oh, that was her mother's name, and I just miss her so much, I see so much of her in there, and kind of like that last minute save. And just when he really starts to trust Leia and her instincts, because he's like saying, don't say anything, but Leia is really the one who saves them in that situation. So I thought that was brilliant writing, at least in that regard. And of course they kind of find him out, and there's this great fight sequence with stormtroopers, and one of them gets cut in half on this laser, which I was like, geez, you won't let Boba Fett let loose and kill some people, but you're going to let that in the show? I mean, I'm not complaining that it's in there, but really, I mean, Book of Boba Fett looks like child play compared to this show. And this episode, just in general, is one of the darkest things that Star Wars has created ever since Disney has acquired the rights. And then, of course, you get introduced to Tala, who is the Imperial officer who is a part of the Path, which is like this kind of, secret underground. It's like the underground railroad for Jedi. And I just thought that was such a cool idea, because obviously there's still a lot of Jedi running amok, because we know Kanan is out there, we know Ahsoka's out there, there's so many. Well, obviously Ahsoka kind of abandoned the Jedi ways, but even so, I think it's a really cool idea. And then of course you get like references to Quinlan Voss, like he wrote on the wall, or like they were talking about him, something like that. And I just love the way they build the scene too, when the stormtroopers come in and they're looking for Obi-Wan and Leia, and you got the robot, that droid, that big droid, and it has like this hammer behind his back, and he's just waiting for the moment to crack the stormtrooper's skull open if he intrudes. But obviously, I just love stuff like that, just dramatic irony in these situations really adds a lot of great tension to the series. But of course, Vader and Riva and all of them find where Obi-Wan is, and this is where the episode gets incredible, and honestly the best we have ever seen Vader. Because yeah, you have that scene in Rogue One where he's slashing rebels down in the hallway, but this is where you're like, this dude is a piece of shit. In just the way like he grabs this guy out of his house and kills him, and then his son tries to come protect him, and then he just breaks his neck. It's absolutely brutal, and the whole time he's just doing this to taunt Obi-Wan. I mean, that is such a brilliant piece of character work, and a wonderful way to enhance one of the greatest villains of all time. And then of course you got the fight between them, which I know a lot of people were upset by, because obviously Obi-Wan runs away, which I think in this situation makes sense, because he's not ready to fight Vader, and yet Vader's still taunting him. Some wonder like, why didn't Vader just kill him? Because then of course he like puts him in the fire, and he just kind of has him face down. And I don't really understand why he just didn't kill him there, because obviously, they had to come in and get saved, and then Obi-Wan gets off. Hooray! I just don't really think that is like where the lazy writing really kind of plays in, because there's a lot of conveniences like that where, a character could have finished someone off, or this could have happened, but okay, well, we got to keep the story going, so we're just going to put in this very convenient thing so our characters can get away. Stuff like that I understand this series has problems with, and it is very, very evident that it's there. But at the end of this episode, Riva grabs Leia, and yeah, now he has to go save her. Which, I mean, that is when this show kind of gets annoying, because it's like, okay, you only have 6 episodes, and what are we going to do? We're just going to drag out this escort-rescue mission? Not the best idea on the writer's part, I don't think at all. But whatever. You know what? I actually do kind of enjoy the 4th episode. As controversial as it is, I get the flaws with it, but at the same time, it isn't like I watch it and I think it's atrocious, because there are things that really don't work about this episode. First off, it feels very, very rushed, especially when they get to the point and you get introduced to O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character, who, I mean, obviously, O'Shea Jackson Jr., really, really good actor, but this whole setup with the path in this episode feels way too rushed. And also, I understand some other things about it too, you know, certain conveniences that happen. Not really the best executed episode. But I will tell you, I don't think this episode gets enough credit, because there is some really, really powerful and deeply disturbing moments in the Star Wars canon here, when Obi-Wan runs into this trophy room that preserves all these Jedi, and you see like the youngling from, I believe, the one from Revenge of the Sith preserved in there, and it's like it's a trophy room of all these corpses. And that, to me, was kind of terrifying, honestly. And so having stuff like that within the episode really adds a lot of weight to it that I don't think a lot of people give it credit for. And of course, seeing Obi-Wan light up his lightsaber and slash some stormtroopers down is always great. I don't think Tala getting in so easily into the Imperial stronghold was very, very good at all, because, you know, there's so many logistical issues with that. Of course, even if she is an Imperial officer with that sort of high clearance, the fact that this stormtrooper didn't even bother to check, I mean, it's just really unbelievable, you know? I mean, yeah, I get this is a show that has droids and like weird creatures and stuff, but it's just lazy writing, and I'm not going to harp on it too much, but really you start to see that come in full force in this episode. No pun intended. And obviously, I didn't mention this yet, but Darth Vader and Riva are in cahoots, and he's like trying to get her to get Obi-Wan. She's trying to get the head up on all the other Inquisitors, because obviously in the second episode, she stabs the Grand Inquisitor just as they're about to find Obi-Wan. Yeah, again, another plot convenience. But if you've seen Rebels, you all know the Grand Inquisitor is alive, that sort of thing, whatever. But I find it very interesting. This is where it starts to get a little interesting, because she knows he's Anakin, but you don't know whether he would have told someone about that. And obviously, once you get to the end of the series, you realize that isn't the case, but it adds definitely some intrigue in the series, which I think was needed. And obviously, you have Riva interrogating Leia, and I think this is where they really build, well, they kind of build this throughout these past few episodes, but Leia's strong inclination of being a leader. And that's what I think goes underappreciated in the series as well, because I think the character work for her is set up incredibly well and stays consistent with who we see her as in that first movie and onwards. So really, really brilliant stuff in that sense. But yeah, they get away, and then of course she has a tracking thing on her droid, and Riva's going to find him. Okay, yet again. Alright, we have to continue this again. Oh, man. I'm kind of getting sick of this. Whatever. And then we get to the 5th episode, which I believe is good, but yet again, so much lazy writing, and really at the same time having some of the most character development in the series so far, especially with Riva. We finally understand what she is about. Another thing I love about this episode is the flashbacks between Obi-Wan and Anakin, played by Hayden Christensen, and just him kind of training and showing how he kind of outsmarts him because Anakin is too rash in his nature and has no patience, as we've seen in the Clone Wars and in this show and in the movies. So really, really great consistent character work there, which leads into Darth Vader's pursuit of Vader in this episode while they're on the Rebel base, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know. But basically, this episode, you know, they're trying to get out of there, but they shut down, you know, the ship's not working, and, you know, Lola cut the wires, so then Leia has to go in and fix it. And then you have Kumail Nanjiani come back for a glorified cameo, because that is what it feels like. But they kind of redeem him. He's like, oh, you know, I'm doing something worthwhile now, and Obi-Wan has him watch Leia while he goes out and fights the stormtroopers and encounters Riva, which obviously she doesn't need watching. And he also gets the message from Bale, like saying, hey, I haven't heard from you, man. Like, what's going on? I'm coming to Tatooine if you don't bring her back. And so you have that message, and I guess he just gave it to Haja for some reason, and he drops it. So that's convenient. Yeah, so, you know, it can be found later on, but we'll get into that. But yeah, we have the battle with the stormtroopers, a whole legion of stormtroopers, and yet they're getting kind of decimated by these rebels, which it makes no sense, but that's how it always is. We'll just say, oh, the stormtroopers missed their shot, they can't shoot for anything. But, you know, it still feels lazy. And of course, I think the best part of this episode, yet it brings up a lot of questions as to the logistics of this character and the series, is when Riva reveals to Obi-Wan that she saw Anakin kill younglings during Order 66, and she pretended to be dead and eventually came back around to find him. And I just find this very weird because, one, why would she turn to the dark side then? I mean, this isn't even about like the power of the dark side or that seduction. It's just kind of like, oh, I gotta get back at Vader, I gotta kill him. Yeah, she is consumed by darkness, but two, I don't understand in this case, because as we were saying about Obi-Wan, I think the only reason she wanted to find Obi-Wan is so she could betray Vader and gain his trust. I don't really understand why it's this, like why she's still so persistent on getting him in that case, because she already brought Vader where he needs to be. That's about it. And why is she telling it in front of this whole legion of stormtroopers? Like, you don't think that they're not hearing this? I mean, stuff like that is really bad writing. It just, call it for what it is. It's very obvious, very convenient. Like, you have to have this exposition, but they just placed it in the most bizarre and really not conducive to getting anything across, reasonably speaking, because you don't want the stormtroopers to know that. Nobody knows that he is Anakin Skywalker besides Palpatine and obviously Riva and Obi-Wan. That's about it. And then, of course, regardless, we get the sacrifice of Tala and her droid, who was so cool. I love that droid. But yeah, it was, you know, it was pretty obvious the way they set it up. So it is what it is. You get that all the time in shows like this. But then again, obviously Leia fixes the ship as you'd expect. Lola gets back to normal. She takes the tracker off or whatever. But yeah, the coolest thing about this episode is when Vader storms in and he's like bringing the ship down with the Force, and it turns out to be a decoy. He explodes, the other ship goes off, and Riva's left there at the moment where she's about to betray him. But he obviously one-ups her as Vader would. They get into this really cool fight sequence, I think, because the whole time Vader's just toying with her when he snaps her lightsaber in half, and he hands her one, and they're fighting, and he still overpowers her, stabs her through the gut. Oh, look, the Grand Inquisitor is alive. All right. You know, so it's one of those things where, you know, they just leave a character there to die, because he's like, oh, you know, I'll leave you in the gutter where I found you. And I do love that moment where he's like, don't think I didn't know what you were doing. I really love that he was already one step ahead of her. I love that idea, and it makes Vader such a force to be reckoned with. And yet again, here's where the conveniences come in. Haja drops the beacon from Bail Organa, and then Riva sees it. It's like, oh, child on Tatooine. Anakin's child? It just feels like, okay, well, we have to set this up, so we're going to do it in a very haphazard and convenient way. Regardless, I do like the episode because of the character work that is present in it, and I just think the stuff with Vader really, really works. Though Riva, yeah, they needed to do a few rewrites on the script. Because then, even after all of this, in the last episode, Riva's like, oh, I'm going to go kill Luke. Which, it's like, why at this point? I mean, he doesn't even know he has a kid. What does this kid have to do with Vader at all, besides the fact that he's his kin that he doesn't even care about? I just don't understand her motivation at all. And I think that's one of the biggest letdowns of this entire series, was that character. And I think by this point in time, we were so focused on this mission that Obi-Wan, you don't really get to dive in to his psyche, which I really wanted to see. There were glimpses of it throughout the series, but even so, it just doesn't fully come together. Besides that, what I will say is this is my favorite episode in the entire series. I absolutely adored this episode, and really, what a finale to close out this series. I mean, just incredible, because of course, you have Obi-Wan's second confrontation with Vader, which I wasn't sure how I felt about at first. You know, very shaky cam. very emotive, like the lightsaber battles in the original trilogy, not like super well choreographed like the ones in the prequels, which I think you needed for something like this, because obviously Vader, we've seen what happened to him when he got thrown onto the lava in Mustafar. He's not where he is. Obi-Wan is beat up and just, kind of sick of this whole entire thing, and he has to fight him. But it really is such a great scene when Vader, buries him in those rocks, and then I guess believes he's dead. This is another little convenience. It's kind of just a minor gripe, but you see this throughout the entire series. And then Obi-Wan comes back, and I just love this scene where he's like pelting Vader with the rocks. And when the mask breaks in half, kind of similar to when Ahsoka faced Anakin in Rebels, you get this amazing scene which the sound design is just so amazing, where they cross James Earl Jones' voice with Hayden Christensen, and it's like this incredible stereo effect that I absolutely adore, and just that conflicting, that light and darkness that we've seen throughout all these movies, the entire trilogy. But when basically Vader tells him Anakin's gone, like, you shouldn't feel guilt that you killed Anakin, that was me who did it. And that was when Obi-Wan realizes, or so he thinks, that his friend is truly lost. And I just love that consistency, and it just strengthens that scene in A New Hope when he says, "When I left you, I was but the learner, and now I am the master. Only a master of evil, Darth." Just such great stuff present throughout this entire thing. And you understand why Obi-Wan would have withheld that information from Luke, because he really did feel like his friend was dead. So, I guess it is true from a certain point of view. So I just love that character work, and really that is when Obi-Wan really comes full circle. He gets that power back that he needed, and I just love that fight scene. So much emotion. That is really the emotional highlight of this whole show. And also we have another instance where Obi-Wan just leaves Vader. I don't know why, yet again another convenient plot point where it's like, okay, well, I guess he'll just die without his respirator or whatever, but at the same time, it's like, we know what happens, and it's like, why did you just leave him there and not finish him off? Was it not the Jedi way? I don't know. I've seen Jedi kill Sith before, so that was really another head-scratching moment, but whatever, I guess. I don't know. I think because it was followed up by something so incredible that left such an indelible impression on me, it doesn't bother me too much. And of course, Obi-Wan goes back to Tatooine, and Riva is attacking the Lars homestead, which I absolutely love, when they're like gearing up to kind of like protect Luke at all costs. You really feel in that moment how great Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru are to this kid. And I just love when Riva says to Uncle Owen, you really love the boy like he's your own. And he's like, he is my own. I mean, that is such a beautiful statement in the series, and really brings the relationship between Luke and his uncle full circle. I absolutely love this moment. I wish that Joel Edgerton was utilized more in the series, but alas, this is what we got, and I'm not going to complain about it. But yeah, then suddenly, out of nowhere, after she sees Luke lying on the ground, she reminds her of herself when she was a Padawan and Anakin was going to kill her. So she decides not to kill him. And it's a little bit conflicting, because I get why that was the case, but what about when all these other Jedi were getting killed who were her peers at the time? Did she not feel bad about that? Like, I don't understand. Like, they really do not make it clear why she turned to the dark side. It really makes no sense at all. There's no consistency with that. But what I will say is that Moses Ingram's performance at the scene when she breaks down and Obi-Wan is consoling her, saying, "You have the right to change," it really was the best scene that she had acting-wise throughout this whole thing. And I think for what she's given, she really does a great job. And I have to commend her for that, at least. But on top of that, you also have a great scene, when he drops Leia off, and Leia's finally happy in her position, where she's like, okay, I could do this leadership thing. And you see her arc come to fruition, throughout the whole thing, just her resourcefulness, her ingenuity. I mean, there's so much going on with that, but when Obi-Wan speaks to her and is like, I see elements of your father and your mother, and he's like explaining all these attributes that she has from each of her parents, and you hear that the John Williams Leia theme playing. I mean, it is tear-inducing. Like, I was tearing up during the scene. It is just incredible what they do, and just the way they tie this relationship together. I absolutely love the two's chemistry in this series, and you really see the care they both share for one another. And I don't think it contradicts, when Leia says, General Kenobi, you served my father well in the Clone Wars. I don't think it really conflicts with that, because it could have just been like, turn of phrase, and obviously the dialogue in the first movie isn't that great to begin with. But it is just such a touching moment, and yet again, seeing Jimmy Smits, can't go wrong with him, ever, and especially in this series. But, of course, the show ends, and Obi-Wan comes back like the next day or something after Riva's gone, and Owen thanks him, and he says, do you want to meet him? And you finally get the first meeting between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker, when he walks up to him and, of course, says the iconic line, which they kind of shoehorned in there, but it was fine. And, it was a really nice scene, and, of course, you see that ship come back again, and that is the one that Luke is flying at the beginning of the first Star Wars movie in his room. And so I love that little, those little Easter eggs that don't really add a whole lot to the story. They don't take away from the story, but they do add a little nice connectivity, to say the least. But to me, just to cap this, just put the cherry on top, if you will, when Obi-Wan sees Qui-Gon, Liam Neeson, as a Force ghost, I was just, look, I don't even like the Phantom Menace, but I'm not immune to that level of fan service. And of course he's like, saying, what took you so long? It's like, you weren't ready to see me. And I just love that Obi-Wan had to regain his connection to the Force to be able to see his old master. And then their training began. I just love this type of fan service. Really, I can't stress it enough. Though I'm not one who buys into literally everything they give me, I do think Obi-Wan was a really solid effort. Yeah, as I said, it has its issues, and this could have been revised at least 3 more times in the writing room. But to say the least, it is just a really strong show. Certainly much more consistent than the Book of Boba Fett. It wasn't like it turned into The Mandalorian Season 2.5 like that show did. And I just love Ewan McGregor coming back to this role, the emotional depth that he gives us, especially in that final fight sequence, in that confrontation between him and Vader. Really his best acting as this character. And I could say that about Joel Edgerton as well, who didn't get much to do in the actual prequel movies. But overall, it is a strong cast, and it just has its issues script-wise. But look, I really do think that even though it isn't quite what I was expecting, it overall was very, very pleasing to me. And I'm going to give Obi-Wan an 8 out of 10. Really like the show a lot. I don't get why everyone is saying this is such a terrible show, because it really is far from it. So, sorry if you feel that way, guys, but I just don't think that is the case. But hey, agree to disagree with me in the comments. Let me know what you thought about Obi-Wan and why you hated it so much. I don't know, something like that. But in the meantime, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. I'm so glad I could finally talk about this with you here. And of course, be on the lookout for my review of Thor: Love and Thunder coming to you pretty soon. And of course, the continuation of the top 70 albums of the 70s. We're not done with that yet, but we're getting near the top of the list, so I can't wait for you guys to join us in that series. And yeah, guys, until the next video, I hope you all take it easy, and I'll see you soon.